as for me, it's keep growing personally, try and grow the business now and keep helping the next generation and hopefully improve surveying if that's possible and get the word out there more so that we don't have such a shortage. I went from this shift of, I guess, as a technical person, and I thought the shortage was a great thing. And then you move into the more of the management and you're like, this is scary. If we want to grow, we got to get more people, and we can't get more people if there's no people out there.
Kris Humphries,
Yep.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Engineer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I want to know, with a background in surveying and spatial services, what's the most important thing for you right now in your project delivery services?
Project delivery. I'd say, with the government's boost in housing and how they want to roll out all these houses in the future to help with, I guess, the housing shortage we got at the moment is DA to SC and putting out new lots, creating new lots so they can build houses on and making that in the most efficient way possible. Because I guess you've probably dealt with it, but there's quite a lot of legislation at the moment slowing things down. So trying to find ways to help our clients fast track their jobs is probably our highest priority at the moment.
So as a general manager of a spatial services business, what's your day-to-day look like for people that don't really understand what survey or spatial services mean?
Yeah, okay. So, I'm the sole registered surveyor in this company as well. So it's split 50-50 between being the general manager and the registered surveyor side of things. But to be honest, a lot of my time is now spent on the business management, but also mentoring the next generation of surveyors coming through and helping them build their careers, because we currently just have a crazy shortage in the industry at the moment. I think, from registered surveyors, there was only 7 new ones come in the last 6 months in the whole of New South Wales. And it's only getting worse, and the average age is I would be considered young for a registered surveyor in New South Wales, so the situation's only getting worse. So trying to help mentor and develop new surveyors is high on my priority list.
How do we get more people into surveying?
It's a tough one, because to be honest, not a lot of people know what we do. If you talk to most people, they think we just stand on the side of the road with a tripod, and that's their only interaction with us. Engineers and all that and adjacent industries probably have more experience with us, but it's not something the public are fully aware of. So I lucked into it by that's all right. I lucked into it. I went to my careers advisor at high school, never heard of it in my life, and he said, well, you're good at maths, you like going outside. I know there's a shortage in this industry, 100% success rate out of uni for careers. And if you hadn't had that conversation, I wouldn't be here today talking to you. So I think it's public awareness is probably one of the biggest things. Tough thing is a lot of unis don't actually offer it. In New South Wales, there's only Uni New South Wales and Newcastle, which makes it hard for regional areas to get the support they need in the industry.
I remember surveying at uni, but it was like a short course, maybe half of a subject or a subject. So how do we pivot industry to get more focus on surveying? Because I feel like engineering, it is hard to fuel the pipeline, but I know what it's like trying to get young engineers. How do you get young surveyors of the ones that are there into your business?
Well, luckily we're like I was talking to you about before we came in. We partner with, or we're a sister company to Group Development Services, so they're engineers, land development firm, planners, all that sort of thing. And to be honest, a couple of our staff have actually come across from an engineering background recently. We needed help with some assistant work on site, and we got some of the junior engineers to come across, and they've actually enjoyed it. And since we've had one come over full time this week, so that's interesting. Not that we're trying to take away from engineers, but it's an avenue that you don't have a lot of the time, and it's hard to try and reach out to new people. I know like Surveyors Australia and the board are trying to target schools and stuff like that. But it's trying to make an industry. I guess it's not. I'll be honest here. It's not the most exciting job. It's not something that people go home and say, "This is my dream that I want to do forever." But it's a great job once you're in the industry.
Yeah, I feel like the question is, how do we make surveying sexy?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I know the ground rules, the topography of the site, the cadastre. I mean, can you see how we could make surveying sexy again?
I guess this is a question I've been thinking about a lot. The closest thing and something that people don't understand is I guess it's a form of treasure hunting, surveying. So you go and try and define a boundary for a property development. To be able to determine where that boundary is, you actually have to get out old maps. So sometimes we'll get maps out from 1850s, look at old deed descriptions. They'll have a mention of a concrete block or even a potential a glass bottle that someone's buried half a metre below the ground off the corner of the property boundary. You've got to calc all that in, connect it into the MGA system, and then you go out often with a metal detector and a shovel and start digging. And it's hard to explain, but the first time you find a concrete block or a gyp that you think there's no chance this is here, and you're digging for 2 hours and you find it, it's a pretty good feeling. But I guess it's treasure hunters, modern day treasure hunters, or that's maybe one way to make it a bit more sexy. But
tell me, there is a terminology, something lock
spit. Yep.
Yeah, lock spit.
Yeah, so it's
can you tell everyone what that means? Because I came across it recently and I thought it was such a cool thing.
Yep.
And I'm of the view that, at least as engineers, we need to tell better stories. We need to talk to the community about what we're doing. We need to be able to explain technical things in easy ways.
Yeah.
Tell us about a lock spit.
So a lock spit is just an old way that they used to define where a boundary was in rural locations. So it's hard to explain, but it's like a trail of rocks along the ground that point toward the corner of the boundary. And yeah, it's often rural and it's pretty exciting finding something like that. Another one is blaze trees. So they used to reference where the boundary corner was by a tree, and they would cut out this shape and then mark on the corner what the portion of the lot was. So you go out now if you want to try and find one, you know it'll say on the plan, it'll say like a gum or a bloodwood or something like that. You show up and you'll look for a tree, you'll look for the type that it said it was, and there'll be this like cleavage where the tree's actually grown back over where they cut out initially. And then you go out with your axe or your chainsaw and chop out this big blade, this shield that it's called, and there should be deadwood behind it, and then you hit it with the back of your axe and it'll just pop out, and there inside the tree will be like a nail and then a broad arrow pointing to the boundary corner. So there's some cool stuff that you can see over your career as a surveyor.
Yeah, those things are so important because it does frame up for a young surveyor, a young engineer. That sounds cool. I want to do that. But there's not a lot of people out there talking about it.
Yeah.
We need more people out talking about surveying, at least in my view, to get more fuel for our infrastructure pipeline. I mean, you mentioned the housing crisis. As a surveyor, what's your take on what might enable faster housing delivery? And I know it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for the silver bullet.
That's a big question.
It is a big question, but it's important because at least I think, as a planner or an engineer or otherwise, everyone's got their own take. You go to a certifier, they've got their own take. I'd be interested to see what a surveyor says or thinks.
I think maybe less about how they can change the industry, but I think engaging your surveyor earlier on can help speed the process up, because a lot of the time you can get to the end of the job and you think you're all good, and here's an example, maybe you're on limited title property where the boundaries have never been defined and you've got a detail survey done for the engineering plan but not the actual plan of subdivision. Now, the boundaries for a detail survey, yes, they're done by a surveyor, but they're not to the level that you could actually subdivide the property. And if it's on limited title, so we had a job come up recently, limited title, when you do that, if the boundaries aren't exactly the same as what's on that first plan, you've then got to get consent from your neighbour to say, we can build on this area. And this site in particular was next to Western Sydney University, and getting us involved in early, we could have seen, yep, it's limited title, let's get this plan redefined early on, because getting a signature from the uni not only includes the uni, but you've got to get signatures from everyone that's leasing that uni. So coffee shops, food eateries, libraries, all that sort of stuff on the uni. Get us involved. You can flag that early on, and it could save you a year or two at the end of the project. Same with pre-examination. I'm not sure if everyone knows about pre-examination, but you can actually send your plans to get reviewed by LRS for registration prior to getting signatures from the council, and that there can save you 3 to 4 weeks post SC to get a plan registered. So just little things like that, they all add up, can get more jobs delivered quicker. As for legislation and council timelines and stuff, I don't really have an answer for that. But
you mentioned LRS,
yep,
and my understanding is that they are going digital.
Yep.
What's your take on that?
There's two different levels of going digital. So there's the digital plans, so digital plan lodgement. That's been incredible. I think it saves a lot of time in errors that could have been picked up, because before we used to manually write up our admin sheets and 88Bs and all that stuff, and then you make one change, you've got to make that change on every page, and if you miss it, then you've got clerical errors. Where the new digital thing, you make it on the workspace, and it just adjusts it on all of your plans after that. It's great. As for digital plan lodgement, so the actual plan going in digitally, I think they're going to have a bit of a struggle with it. As I said earlier, we're in a bit of a aging industry, so we're not the greatest when it comes to making changes, is probably the way that I would go about it. And the systems they have in place, I don't know if they're fully there yet. Like, I think you either got to go fully digital or not. Because currently they're expecting a paper plan and a digital plan is what the goal is. So you're doubling up the work, which doesn't help with efficiencies. So I think it's all in or nothing, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people think, okay, surveying, theodolites, chainmen, like all these sort of, you talked about lockspits, and thinking, well, digital revolution, everything going digital, tech, AI, which I hope to touch on, but, surely we have to be moving in that way. I mean, people talk about like BIM models and 3D. Do you think that we could get maybe in the next 5 years to something where you go to a development and the cadastral boundary is already nearly there, or you've already got a reference, or maybe topographical survey with LiDAR becomes so good that, where are the gaps?
We recently just did, so we had 120 plus hectare development for about 1,200 lots over multi-stage, and we've just done the greenfield detail survey, a topographical survey by a drone and LiDAR, and then stitching it together with on-the-ground boundary definition. And to be honest, I think like it's a better tool than traditional methods for stuff of that size, because we're doing it traditionally, we're getting a measurement with that pole. Where we get the measurement with the pole, that's accurate. But then on a site that's 120 hectares, we might get a measurement every 20 metres. So you've got that interpolation issue in between, where the LiDAR, maybe 20, 30 mil out in height, but it's a blanket over the whole thing, which is, I think, being relative to each other is more important than having these interpolation errors. And it saves a lot of time. It shortened the process up a lot. And then you can create these visualization tools for clients that might not be able to read a topographical map in 2D. You can now create like a BIM model or a 3D model of the layout for them to be able to visualize and say, okay, actually, I wouldn't mind changing the design to go up this way. As for the boundaries with the cadastre, I think it's a long way off. I think because the problem is we're working off plans that were created in the 1800s and trying and the tools they had and the accuracy of the tools they had at that time, and they used to work from block to block and the cadastres over the whole state.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess there's the age-old thing that the Earth's not flat, so you've got issues with curvature of the Earth and grid and ground conversions and all that sort of stuff. I think it's a massive task for them to try and accurately create a cadastre without the need of a surveyor. But it is getting better.
What do you mean the Earth's not flat? Seriously?
Yeah.
You started touching on some things like drones, LiDAR. Maybe for some of the listeners, maybe talk about those bits of tech, and then for those instruments or equipment, what's something that you're using at the moment? Like you mentioned drones, sounds cool.
Yep.
Like tell us a bit more about that so that we can get a bit of an understanding, because I think people think surveying, but to know that there's like some cool tech or some robot doing something, sort of that sounds really cool. Yeah.
So we definitely
I'm trying to fuel some surveyors here for you, Kris.
Sounds like a good plan, but so we use drones regularly now. Different sizes, so we might have like just a little DJI Phantom, throw that up, and it's got a RTK GNSS, so it connects to the GPS system.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Way too many acronyms.
Yeah.
Just step us through what that means.
Basically, that it talks to the satellites and recognises its position within location of MGA. We also then put
MGA.
Okay.
Let's take a step back. I know what that is, but let's talk over here. Give the listeners' version.
So MGA is for Map Grid of Australia. It's basically the coordinates that tell you where you are. So it's how your GPS on your phone would work. It all works on the same systems where you're in a location, you need to know where you are. There's a coordinate for that location. There's the Map Grid of Australia. And that's what we use. There's different zones depending on where in the country you are. So we're primarily in zone 55, 56. So you've got now your drone. It's a bit fancier than the one that you would probably fly around to take photos on holidays or something like that, and it can then talk to those satellites and pinpoint to a certain level of accuracy where it is. The GPS on that's still not accurate enough, so we then have to put these control points on the ground, which we pick up with our traditional methods to say this is the coordinate, we know where it is, and then the drone goes over, and when it flies over it takes photos, and it'll stitch all the photos together to create this 3D model. And then if you want to go even bigger, like we did for this 120 hectare job, you can throw a laser scanner on the drone. So you got a big quadcopter, flies up with a laser scanner, and it's just shooting out thousands of points. It's almost too much information. So you can
bit of TMI.
Yeah. So then you strip it back, give it out to the client, but then you've always got that data that you need at the end. But yeah, it's all interesting. We had another job recently. We partnered with a contractor, and he actually got a laser scanner and put it on top of a vehicle and drove down. So it was about 9 kilometres in rural road in the Blue Mountains. You don't want to shut down 9 kilometres of road for 3 weeks. So instead, they throw the laser scanner on the top, and it just does its thing, just goes around taking measurements as they drive, and it turned into a 2-day job.
Wow.
So it's all about efficiency, and then you've got this incredible model as well afterwards.
How much of that value or that tech, not just that you're using, but I can imagine you say to a client, hey, this could be 3 weeks, but we're going to do it in 2 days. There's some real value in that you can see straight away from using the tech.
Yep.
So is it you're using it on all your jobs, or do you think that there's use it for different scenarios? How do you pivot to get the best for a project?
It's not all jobs, and I had a one-on-one with one of my staff today, and we actually talked about fit for purpose is something we talk about all the time. So they're incredible tools, but you can't use it for everything. So you got to then determine, can this be used because it's for a greenfield subdivision and we're doing a brand new design? Can we use that tool if it's in, I don't know, the inner west of Sydney and we're talking millimetres are super important and the 200 square metre blocks and people are fighting over 1 square metre, and you can't do it. And like I said before, we sometimes have to dig for survey marks to determine where boundaries are. You can't use tools like that, so you still got to go out and use your traditional methods. So it's determining what's fit for purpose. But if a client maybe understands these tools we can use, they can come and talk to us and say, well, could we use this and have a more efficient job? Because our cost is only a small part of a project, and efficiency and holding costs and long term has a massive effect on the client, and might be slightly more expensive up front, but it might save tens, hundreds of $1,000s down the track.
Sounds like a good pitch.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're not getting replaced by a robot just yet.
Not yet.
Sounds like the tech is useful, but there's still the need for human intervention.
Yep.
As always, I do like thinking about the future and AI and what that looks like. What are you seeing in your industry with AI, if anything, or what do you think that it could do?
I think a massive thing that I've used it for, and it's nothing fancy, but surveyors, a lot of people who got into surveying were not the greatest communicators, and sometimes we're so deep into our terminology, and like you've called me out a couple of times already,
Sorry about that.
It's great to use for like old deed descriptions, 88Bs, titles. Again, I'm using these acronyms, but getting that information and then saying, how could I explain this to a PM or an engineer so that they could understand it in their own terminology? I think that's a great tool. I've also got it to review some lot areas and stuff and unit entitlements because we were having some discrepancies, so trying to determine where the issue was. But we're still very early days, and it's something we're exploring at the moment, is how we can best utilise it. Because the hardest thing, well, you've probably looked into AI, but a lot of it's based on information found on the internet. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on surveying on the internet, especially technical stuff, and a lot of our stuff is very location-based as well. So you might know exactly what you're doing in New South Wales, or not even New South Wales. Let's say Liverpool City Council has completely different requirements to the Hillshire Council, and they're so close by. So you can't just rely on AI to know all of that information and how to deal with the council and all that. So I think it's a work in progress and trying to learn as much as we can.
Well, you'll like this one. So had a plan a subdivision. It had lots, areas, and someone just said, oh, what's the total net saleable area of the plan?
Yep.
Typically someone, without being the author of said plan or having the original CAD file, the native file, would just go, okay, and they'd get a spreadsheet and they'd go, lot 1, 2, 3, 500, 400, 3, and just do a big table and sum all that up. You put that thing into an AI bot, ask it for the total area, boom. Not even 4 seconds. That is supreme leverage. And I could see, like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of ways that it will help. But to your earlier point, humans will still be doing surveying for some time soon. I presume.
I'd say, as long as you got to go out on site and dig up marks in the ground, we can definitely leverage it for stuff in the office. But it's that field side of thing it's very difficult.
Almost like the plumber. But I do worry that we're going to have robot plumbers as well. No offense to plumbers. Just an example. So the title of the podcast is The Entrepreneurial Engineer. It isn't The Entrepreneurial Surveyor, but that's okay. How did you get into surveying? How did your journey through your career get you to where you are right now?
So I guess I mentioned a little bit earlier, but the careers advisor pushed me in this direction. I thought, okay, let's give it a try. Did some work experience while still in high school at a local firm. Loved it. And then I did, I guess, what everyone jokes about now, but I knocked on doors the day after I finished high school and went looking for jobs. And it was, obviously there was a massive shortage then still, and I think I had about 5 or 6 offers for part-time employment while doing uni just the next couple of days after that. And I've been doing it ever since. So I started in private industry doing similar to what I'm doing now, greenfield subdivisions. Then got the opportunity to work at local government, which I think a lot of people told me that was the death of my career. And I think it was probably one of the best things that I've ever done, just because you get an understanding of how the council works, which as a surveyor you've got to deal with on a daily basis. And you had the time and the resources to be able to actually learn, properly learn. And then once you get that knowledge, and taking it back out to the private industry helped a lot. And that was when I met John Evans. So he was my mentor, probably my first serious mentor in my career, and he sort of took me under his wing and taught me a lot about what he knew, and also the management of the team and the technical side. So he helped me through my whole registration process, and then got registered, and now we're here. We're in the private industry, and in the last 6 months moved more into the senior management and running a business.
36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe.
How did you, and I very much appreciate the working for council, both private and public sectors, very important, I believe, in a career. How did you get to the point where you pivoted into management, or you mentioned business development, or opening a new office, or how do you go away from going, I'm going to do this now, or did someone say, yep, you, or is it you just sort of went, well, you know what, I'm a good talker, I like people. Like, how did you make that shift?
So it was sort of, when I got the job at the council, that was what they'd pigeonholed me to go into. So it was my mentor that I talked about. He was 3 or 4 years out from retirement, so they needed someone to fill that role, and that was they couldn't get someone that was registered at that point because there was a shortage then as well. And they said, well, let's put someone on, a graduate, let's get them through the registration process, teach them the management, and then take on from that side of things. And it was just a coincidence, and I just loved that side of things. So then I had a few graduates that I then started helping through the registration process, and found a passion for mentorship and actually helping develop others. And then also just it's the business side of things is interesting as well. I guess it's just something that I enjoyed once I started getting into. So then I sort of pushed my own career in that direction so that I'd get more enjoyment out of my day-to-day. I'm the sort of person that always wants to grow and learn, and I think business is one of those things where you'll never stop growing and learning, because it's just so dynamic and changing, and every day you're doing something different. But still having that technical side for days when you just want to focus is great as well. So that's a long-winded answer, but it was sort of council had it earmarked for me, and when I did it, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Very passionate about engineering, around technical competency, around delivering that confidently, and I sort of think you can't really have one without the other. You've got to have that confidence base, which it sounds like you built up that confidence to then go sell the service.
Yep.
In that, how do you balance that? How do you balance that technical and that business side? Because it's obviously not just like one day I'm this, one day I'm that. How do you balance that?
Well, I think the mentorship and getting a good team is the biggest part of it. If you've got a team that you invest your time in, it gets to the point where the technical stuff becomes quite quick, because they're doing stuff the way you like to do it, or to sign off on it, or they have the ability to critically think and come up with solutions before they come to you, so then you can focus on the business development. I think having a great team around you is the most important thing, and having trust and spending the time to help develop them is important.
It's all about the people.
Yeah. It's a cop-out answer, but it couldn't be any more true. It's having a good team around you is the most important thing.
So what's your key takeaway or key message to say a young engineer or someone going into the industry, or even a young surveyor, what's your advice for them right now, green coming into the industry?
I think ask as many questions as you possibly can. Like, even if they seem stupid, just ask them, and hopefully your mentor's open-minded and happy to help. But I think I get excited when people ask thoughtful questions and then act on it, sort of thing. And I think that helps your development as much as possible, and it helps you get seen from a career development side of things as well, instead of hiding in the corner. And obviously try and figure things out yourself, because sometimes the best way to learn is to make your own mistakes, but also reach out to those that can help.
And what about, someone who might be thinking about going to surveying? Maybe not an engineer, maybe at school. What sort of pathways are there, and how do we as an industry, I know we touched on it a little bit before, but I really want to dive on that, because, it's the pitch, right? We're pitching to them. You're trying to pitch to them.
Yep.
I could see that it's cool. You get to fly drones and drive utes with laser scanners and that all sounds super cool. Like, I want to be a surveyor now, right? But how do you get that message to them? What do you think would be the best way to do that?
How do I get the message out to others?
Oh yeah, how do you? How do you think an industry is going to be able to do that more and more? I know we touched on it, but it's like, I feel like that's a really important piece, because, I know with engineering, right? It's very easy. We got engineers retiring by the bucket loads. There's the grey hairs are going, and you feel like that all the time. There are younger and younger engineers coming through, and I think that's a really great thing, but it feels like surveying's got the same problem.
Yeah, definitely does. Well, coming to talk to you was one of the things. That was try and get a reach to an audience that's, I guess, similarly inclined to the type of work that they would be interested in doing, and reaching out that way, trying to use LinkedIn as a tool as well, as much as possible, just to, I guess, share some insights of surveying and show that it's not just standing on the side of a construction site with a tripod, and there's a lot more to it. Because I think even we've had surveyors come across that are primarily construction surveyors into the cadastral or boundary side of things, and they weren't aware of how much we actually did. So just trying to educate as many people as possible is my goal at the moment. I think also surveying's got a unique proposition when it comes to, we can offer up work experience or survey assistant roles where you can do it through uni and not, you learn on the job sort of thing, because you can go out with a field surveyor, and you can go help, dig holes or set up a traverse station like our tripods on the side of the road, and genuinely help, but also learn at the same time and not get thrown right in the deep end. So there's becoming less and less of that with robotic instruments where they turn and spin all by themselves, but it's a good opportunity to get experience and try before you commit, because 4 degree is a long time before you actually try something. So that's how I started. I started as an assistant going through uni, and we're talking about that engineer that we brought across from the sister company was same thing. Used him as a field hand, and it helped us, so we could still say it was worth its while, but he got to have a bit of a try of it before he said, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing this long term.
You mentioned a 4-year degree.
Yep.
Is that currently the pathway to get into surveying?
So there's two options. So there's TAFE, so you can get a diploma in TAFE. So that's more of like probably long-term career would be more in the field. Then you have a 4-year degree at uni, which that's primarily why you go down that path, is if you want to go down the registration, so signing off on plans of subdivisions and all that sort of thing. So it's a 4-year degree, and then it's 5 registration projects. So you got to do a civil engineering design of a 40-lot subdivision, got to do a statement of environmental effects for a town planning project, and then strata, urban and rural. So you got to do 5 projects. Often they take 6 months apiece, so it's about 2.5 years post uni, and then you get your registration. So it is quite interesting, and you get quite a broad knowledge base of civil engineering, because obviously you've done a whole design plus stormwater design for it, and the whole town planning side of things as well.
Yeah, so what you're really saying, and I'm even just going to go harder on this, so you do your degree, you've got to do this, I'll call it like, to become registered.
Mm-hmm.
But to get registered, you've also got to do some engineering and
Yep.
some town planning.
Yep.
Which to me sounds like, well, hold on. The surveyor is not just a surveyor, you're also doing engineering and some town planning.
Yeah, well, and in regional areas, a lot of the companies that are, the surveying, civil engineering, town planning are run by surveyors and owned by surveyors because they have that knowledge of the three, and then they can delegate accordingly. It's less like that in Sydney and urban centres because there's more specialisation, but it's definitely something you can pivot to. And a lot of surveyors do their registration and go, maybe we'll go down the path of town planning a bit more, or that side of things. So there's a lot of growth and career development from that side of things. And I guess because it's so difficult to get to that point, it's created this scarcity that I guess it's worth its while once you get to the other end.
There are a few grey hairs out there I know that would love that I said that, because I do know some that in Sydney that still do town planning and civil. And it is funny, I think they're some of the best.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think that legacy, those mentors, and I call them grey hairs, and I'm nothing against grey hair. I have some, if you believe it. But that, for me, that knowledge and that experience, you see, you're a young guy, right?
Yep.
I feel like, we're young men in a way.
Ish.
How do you think we get all that knowledge and either slow down them leaving, or how do we garner all that information out of those beautiful minds so that, because in the next 5 years, I feel like there's going to be thousands of them just leaving the industry, and we're all just going to be like, well, where do all grey hairs go? What are we going to do now? Surveying, how do you think we can tackle that?
Oh, I guess by communicating, and it's like we have conferences, and I guess, but a lot of people just treat them as tick the box to get your points for the year, because we got our 15 CPD points we have every year, and I guess I'm probably guilty of it as well. It's like let's get this done so we can get our points, but actually reaching out, talking to people, because the older generation's got a wealth of knowledge of ways to do things and how to find marks that, I guess, technology's great, but you can get an over-reliance on technology, and it's sort of, you lose the actual skill side of things. So I guess just communication with them as much as possible, because there is going to be a massive knowledge, hopefully, transfer at some point. If not, it might just disappear, and
that scares me. It really does. There's this conflicting, you've got this tech, you've got this, potential of AI and robots and whatever, and then you've also got a lot of that experience leaving the industry, and I feel like we're in this sort of like crunch point where you've got a lot of experience leaving, a lot of tech replacing that experience.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of errors that can be made. There's a lot of things that won't get done right.
Yep.
Can you see that in a way? Do you think that risk is a reality?
I think that, I also see a big risk in certain parts of surveying. There's a lot of, and I'm sure it's the same with a lot of industries, but undercutting to get the job, because one of my biggest issues I've got at the moment is how do you sell an industry or yourself to people that don't really understand what you're doing and what value you can add, because a lot of people see us as a tick box on a DA and go, let's get the surveyor, yep, tick that. So then if they see it as a tick box, it's now, well, what's the lowest price? How can we get that? And that's the risk we're making. I think a lot of surveys their quality's reducing to try and get those projects and get the clients and stuff like that. So that's also a risk. And a lot of the older surveyors don't engage in that. It's like, that's more of a newer, I think, breed of surveyors that are sort of stirring up the undercutting side of things.
It's a race to the bottom. that is even more scary, because I know, I think, for me at least, there's this pivot almost in your career where you start to understand your hourly rate. You know what your hourly rate is, you can bill for your hourly rate. And I think that's a mindset shift to go, well, every hour I do on this project, or the value I bring, and how do I quantify that? What is the lump sum for this work, and why is it based on that? And breaking down prices into hours and outputs and time and that hourly rate, and timesing it together and going, okay, well, I've got to do 30 hours in the field, $200 an hour, that's this price. And that is the reason for breaking down this price. You're right. I see that there is a reality where people go, well, what value is the surveyor bringing other than the accuracy of their survey, which you should say should be guaranteed almost. That should be your registered surveyor should be guaranteed. It should be accurate, right?
Yeah.
How do you differentiate? How do you say, in an industry, well, you mentioned a client says, oh, this is just tick the box with my DA.
Yeah.
How do you get yourself out of that race to the bottom that you're talking about? What's your...
Yeah, well, I guess that's, we really push the pre-examination process. It is a larger upfront cost to the client, but with mortgages and interest rates, especially in Sydney, like if you're subdividing a property into 2 lots and you've got to pay your mortgage repayments on, I don't know, $1-2 million property for another 4 weeks, the difference between a $4,000 or $6,000 quote is not much when you think of it like that. So that's sort of our selling proposition, is that we try and provide value and create more efficiency, because our cost is such a small component compared to stuff like holding costs and mortgage repayments and stuff like that. But it is a hard sell, because I know I'm probably the same with other industries that I don't understand, and I just go, oh, what's the cheapest thing I can get?
Well, then does it come down to time? Like, I feel like you're talking about efficiency, so you say, okay, well, we can do it quicker, or we get a faster result. How do you take it away from that tick box to maybe a time or efficiency, and how do you create that message?
It's a good question. It's one I've been grappling with for the last 3 to 6 months, trying to figure that out, because I know how some other places work, and it feels like an assembly line that's the way to create efficiencies, is have like an assembly line where people specialize in very specific things, but then you're not really becoming, I like to try and think of us as like an employee of choice, where people go to learn and better themselves while also creating the best possible product for the client. So maybe it's about chasing the type of work that works best for you than trying to battle with those race to the bottom, because when you have that, like, I guess, assembly line is where you start having, I guess, errors creep in. You maybe have less experienced people doing more than they need to, which can cause issues. Like maybe for a 2-3 lotter, you're talking about 5 to 10,000 for a plan of subdivision or something, for example. Like it might seem like a lot up front, but if you have an issue with your boundaries and now you've built your house and it's 500 off the boundary when the minimum's a metre, you're in all sorts of trouble. So it's trying to pass that message on without sounding like...
Told you so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like we talked about, young surveyors. We've identified that there's a shortage. There is maybe a race to the bottom because it is tick box. Because I also see it's quite counterintuitive, because, if there's not a lot of supply, then you'd think, well, maybe the demand would be higher because there's less surveyors, and less surveyors means that the prices would go higher. How does that work?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So, like, you'll find companies trying to look for registered surveyors or surveyors for a year or two, like before they even start getting bites, just because the amount they can charge out to clients is not what the demand has for the individuals. So again, it then finds the companies that have got these, I don't want to say high value, but they maybe appreciate the quality of work that comes across and how it affects them long term. Companies that have those types of clients will often end up getting most of the surveyors. So there's just a shortage. It's but people don't want to pay for it, so we're sort of stuck in this middle point where no one knows what's happening.
Yeah, and I guess to understand, it feels like that the pathway is from, uni to some field work, the plans, registration, going through that process. And then is it to business ownership or that ownership role? Is there a technical pathway? Because I know in engineering, it's like your undergrad, your grad, your experience, your senior, your principal, your associate, your technical directors. Like, you've got these nice layers. Do you have that in surveying?
I guess we do. So we would have like a survey assistant, then we have a survey technician, a surveyor, senior surveyor, and then you've got your registered surveyors. Once you get to that point, you either decide, do I want to go technical path or do I want to go management path, or both? And because often the registered surveyors, because of the fact that they're doing a lot of office work, they sort of get pigeonholed into the management side of things, which is great for some. Some thrive on that, and then others, they just technical people. That's what they prefer to do. It gets a bit less clear when on the if you don't go down the registration path. But yeah, I think it ends up going down that like ownership or senior management side of things. It also, because you've got that town planning experience, because you've got that civil engineering experience and surveying, there's also the opportunity then you could just go down into the land development side of things, because you have enough like, I'm not saying we're experts in town planning or civil engineering, but we have the understanding that you can be quite useful to those in the land development space.
I have seen some surveyors become property developers.
Yep.
Funnily enough. And that feels like that would be the ultimate entrepreneurial shift.
Yeah.
Not just the business, but you're actually going to do the work on your own land, which would be super exciting.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there is that growth outside of, if you want to leave the technical side of things. But yeah, most don't. And I don't know if it's because the people that get into it are not the type of, it's not the type of people that strive for that side of things. I'd say we're definitely more technical than outgoing for the majority of the industry. So, and I think you've got to be a bit outgoing and for property development.
Do you think that's the next wave of surveyors, maybe?
I think it could be.
Yeah. You never know.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice.
Yeah.
Because I think that's part of the problem with people just aren't aware of it, because people don't speak up about it and don't push it enough as a career.
Well, I feel like in this conversation we've gone so full circle from, your journey, how you've pivoted, the entrepreneurial nature of surveying, what that could be, the tech, the industry itself, and I'm just seeing this whole, future of surveying. In maybe in a final point, what's your take on the future of surveying, and maybe what's next for you?
What's next for me and what's the future of surveying? Well, I think it's definitely new technology is the future of surveying. I think we went for such a long period where nothing really changed, and now we've got all these tools that can be utilised, the drones, the laser scanners, BIM modelling, like you said, that they're talking about the digital twin and the GIS and the merging of surveying and GIS. And then as for me, it's I don't know at this point. Just keep growing personally, try and grow the business now, and keep helping the next generation, and hopefully improve surveying if that's possible, and get the word out there more so that we don't have such a shortage. Because I went from this shift of, I guess, as a technical person, and I thought the shortage was a great thing. I thought, this is great. This is great for me. And then you move into the more of a management, and you're like, this is scary. It's like, if we want to grow, we got to get more people, and we can't get more people if there's no people out there. So it's definitely been a mentality shift for me in the last 2-3 years, from how good's this to how can we fix this.
Well, Kris, I honestly and humbly believe that, and I hopefully do believe that from this conversation, someone will listen. They're going to get into surveying. They contact you. They're gonna look up surveying and think, wow, this is something that has so many opportunities that aren't just, holding a staff or setting up your theodolite or whatever it might be, from tech to property development to town planning to engineering. It feels like it's so multifaceted. So I do hopefully believe that someone will get something out of this. So thank you very much for
Thanks for
coming on the
having me.
podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's get cracking surveying.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanking you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.